right. It is January 4th, 2026, and the Bald Man is 4 for 4. 4 books, 4 days in 2026. I'm going to do a little breakdown of what I've read so far. I read this. This is Joe McKinney's Flesh Eaters. It is the third volume in this zombie series. This is the one that won the Bram Stoker Award, and I didn't really like the first two, but I wanted to read the first two before reading this one. This was part of my project of reading the Bram Stoker Award winners, and I really liked this one actually quite a lot. I didn't like the other two so much. They were okay, but this one is grounded in the kind of realism, and the zombie epidemic in this is juxtaposed against a hurricane in Texas. And, that allows us to actually get accustomed to these characters and the police and emergency services. So when the zombies actually come up, it becomes a very gripping and surprisingly realistic zombie tale. He has real talent. I wish he would have done that in the first two books, but he didn't in this, and he did win the Bram Stoker Award. This ended up being pretty good. The second book I read was Gunter Grass's Crab Walk. I had read the Tin Drum trilogy. I really loved the Tin Drum. The other two books were okay. This one is just okay. It's about this historical incident involving a birth on a boat, and it's interesting to see Gunter Grass juxtapose this with being online very early on in the internet, but I don't think this really quite worked for me. I didn't feel that the history or even the personalities, when it shifts between a number of characters, I don't think it really worked for me very well. It seemed very much like, an old man going through the motions, pulling his fucking punches. I will always love the Tin Drum. That's a masterpiece, but looks like that's really... he's never ever going to top that, and I may be done with Gunter Grass for the time being. Then I read this book, which is the best of the four. This is Vincent van Gogh's A Life in Letters. My dear friend got this for me for Christmas, and I found this to be so utterly sad and poignant. Oh, it turns out that Van Gogh was an extremely thoughtful and philosophical guy, and as we get closer to, his tragic end, his mental breakdown, cutting off his ear, his suicide, I felt I actually was misting up reading this because, there are also pictures of his letters, and you see the insets that he drew. So you see like his representations of the sunflowers. I found this to be so utterly moving and so sad that, I don't know what would have appeased Vincent. And then his brother Theo generously offered support, and then after Vincent died, Theo died pretty quick afterwards. It's the Van Gogh situation is so sad. He was absolutely a genius, and while this was very sad, I feel a stronger need to keep Van Gogh's legacy alive, as I suppose everybody else has too. I mean, how can you not empathize in some way with Van Gogh? Then the fourth book I read in 2026 is this one. This is Miranda July's All Fours. I am very familiar with her films. I had not really read her fiction. I believe I read a couple of short stories and essays over the years. I largely loved this book. However, so this basically deals with this privileged artist who goes on a road trip to New York and never really arrives there and ends up having an affair along the way where she has a sexual awakening. The sexual awakening part of this book wasn't as compelling to me as the way that July described her journey to New York, and we got to see the way that her mind worked and how it was missing certain associations that were vital. And she goes into that a little bit later in the second half, but not as much. It's not as interesting as the first half. I think that this character was far more interesting before she transformed, weirdly enough, even though she writes about sex very well, in very original and evocative ways. And by and large, I enjoyed it, however, and I can recommend this. I know that a lot of people have had problems with this book. Not me. I mean, I've known people like the couple in this book who have done shit like this. So I wish it would have been a little bit more vivacious in the second half. But I did more or less like it. And those are the 4 books I've read in 2026 so far. I pretty much, I would say, aside from The Grass, I would recommend all three, but especially this one. You know, I, I'm always gonna, I'm always gonna love the artists and the outliers and the underdogs, and he absolutely epitomizes this. I think that my friend gave me this book because she wanted me to know that my own little esoteric shit was also loved, and she's I hung out with her today, and it was just it was glorious. So yeah, Happy New Year. I hope you had a wonderful Happy New Year weekend. I can't believe we have to go back into the fucking to work tomorrow, but hey, that's is what it is.